So hi, I'm Laura Johnson, and I'm one of the founding members of the Career Experts Group, which is a consortium of master career practitioners and personal branding strategists. And we have one mission, and that is to guide and support individuals, whether they're at the beginnings of their career or they've made it to the C-suite or beyond. So each month we publish a newsletter we call Your Career, Your Future. And it includes the latest industry and career trends and tips and tricks to help you find your next position, to climb the ladder, or to be the best in the position that you have. Our July newsletter is focused on the freedom to be you. And today I have the pleasure of speaking to an extraordinary individual who has experienced a unique journey through various careers. Kim Kristensen is a certified mediator through the Virginia Supreme Court and a somatic experience practitioner. He has led men's leadership and empowerment groups for over 20 years, has experience training in the corporate, nonprofit, and government settings, has taught teaching leadership, conflict management, applied psychology, sociology, and critical thinking for several universities. He trains teenagers in conflict resolution, mediates conflicts between individuals, teams, and groups of over 30 people. And he's also an individual coach and has been for 15 years. So from his beginnings, Kim's beginnings in the circus, to his current role as mediator, he has a story that I feel is both fascinating and more so inspiring. So join me now as we dive into his professional transitions, the skills he's acquired along the way, and how his diverse background has influenced his approach to all the roles he's taken, including the mediation role that he currently has. So welcome, Kim, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Laura.
I think the most obvious question is, how did you end up in the circus, and what did you do?
I ended up in the circus through an accident of birth. So that's the short version. My parents were immigrants, and they were recruited. They were circus performers in Europe, and they were recruited by Ringling Brothers. And and so, all my earliest memories were being with the circus. They didn't stay with Ringling. They stayed with them about 4 or 5 years, and then they went on to work all these other independent shrine circuses and things like that. So, so I ended up being in the circus because I was born into it. I was a kind of a trick rider on horses, an acrobat. So I did somersaults on the horse, jumping on and off and things like that. And I was also an aerialist like my parents, just for a while. And then I also trained animals in the circus, horses mostly, and also helped my parents training their leopards. And I just want to throw in real quickly, if anybody's frowning right now, I don't support animals in the circus, even after that background, even after the fact that my parents treated them really well, but I'm just not a fan of that.
So in talking with you in the past, I'm inspired by your continued curiosity. And I think throughout your professional life, you've embraced change, you've been curious, you've embarked on new career paths. What prompted you to make a change? I think you said you were 24 when you decided you wanted to do something different. So what prompted that?
I think of a Kurt Vonnegut novel quote that says, "I was a victim of a series of accidents." But I'm not a victim, but a lot of things, almost like I almost stumbled into them almost, and then embraced them. At age 24, after being in the circus for that long, I decided, there was 2 things that happened. First of all, circus work is hard, and it can be profitable, but it's a lot of work, and it's 9 to 10 months out of the year grind. And so I was getting tired of it. So I wanted a more stable life. I wanted to be in the same place at least 3 days in a row, maybe. And also wanted more stable relationships, friendships. And I wanted to go to college. And my parents wanted that for me too, which is unusual because a lot of circus kids don't go to college, at least back when I was going through all this.
Mhm.
At the same time, my parents were, we had three rather large circus acts, and they had their aerial act that they worked without a net. Then we had a bunch of horses that ran in a circle in a ring. You may have seen that. And we also got the leopards. And just a cute story. My parents realized when they were doing the aerial act without a net, and they realized that at some point they said, we're going to get too old for this sooner or later. Nobody wants to see, and this isn't ageism. It's just, it's the circus. Nobody wants to see an old person swinging around up in the air, and nobody wants them hurt either. So they realized they needed to stop. So they said, we're going to do something more important, more safe, actually, safer. And that's when, and to my surprise too, they went out and got the leopards. And they actually purchased a turnkey leopard act from an older couple that were aging out and decided to retire, and got trained by them. But my parents had already had a background working with wild animals when they were in Europe and Denmark. So they decided, we're going to do that. That's too much. We tried it for like 2 years, and it was incredibly grueling, fun, but just, intense, and having three major acts. Most people in the circus have one big act, maybe sometimes one small one or two small ones. We had three bigger ones, meaning like center ring type stuff. So finally they just said, hey, we're going to let the horse act go, the trick riding stuff go. Also because horses eat a lot and they're big, and it also required having a staff. They said, we're just going to do the aerial act and the leopards for 1 year, and then they cut out the aerial act, and we're just only going to do leopards. So all of that came together, kind of a perfect storm, kind of in a good way. And I decided to finish high school, actually, because I was 18, and then originally I was 18 when that decision was made.
When you're at the circus, you don't think about all the behind the scenes things, and the fact that you travel all over the country, all over in different parts of the world. It's really not just a source of entertainment for us, but I imagine it was a training ground for you to build a diverse set of skills, the management, the leadership, all of that other stuff that you wouldn't think about.
Yeah.
Tell me about how that work in your early life informed your careers.
It helped me be more adaptable. So, in the circus, you have to deal with a lot of different things. One thing is, we really don't have a safety net, literally and figuratively. There is no health insurance. There wasn't back then. Some larger circuses have that now. There were basically no benefits. So basically, you had to save up for stuff. There were no sick days. There were no vacations. There were no holidays. We literally worked on every holiday you can imagine, because sometimes there was a holiday circus. And so self-sufficiency was a big part of it, and learning to adapt quickly. And first of all, let me just say that the term, the show must go on, is not a myth. I have worked ill, really sick before, and I won't spare you the details. My mom has literally jumped on and off horses and stuff with a broken ankle. Sounds crazy, but the show must go on. Even if it rained, we went to our rain mode of working in the mud if it was outdoors. The self-sufficiency part, when we rolled into a place, it could be anything from a civic center, Coliseum, to an old rodeo grounds in Oklahoma. I mean, you name it, fairgrounds. I've worked at all of these. And first thing we had to do was figure out, where are we going to park? Where is water? Where is electricity? So we're kind of going through, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so, we needed survival stuff first. And then we had to find all that and then quickly get the animals into a more comfortable place. So pitch the tent for the animals. They came first always, and got them food and water and comfort. And so if we were driving, it wouldn't be unusual for us to drive 4 hours overnight, sometimes 8 hours. Which meant that you would leave a place after the last performance, which usually ended at 10 or 11 p.m. And then we would tear everything down. And by midnight or 1 a.m., we would be on the road. And then we would arrive at the next place in the morning. And there was no sleeping because the animals needed to be taken care of. So we would unload everything, set at least some stuff up, try to grab a nap, and then get the circus set up for the performance, which usually happened sometime afternoon. So I think some of the skills were adaptability and self-sufficiency that I carried through my career. Also dealing with diversity. I worked early on, I was in my teens or younger, and I was around diversity. People literally from, the African continent, the European continent, South American continent, from Asia, and there were performers from all over the world. And these were very talented people and with a lot of different skills. Also in the LGBTQ community, the people were out in the circus long before it was a thing, more popular. And so, there were different performers who were, out, and it was just part of life. So the diversity was there, and my parents were, they were from Europe. They were very open-minded and accepting. I mean, I met people from all over the country. We mostly traveled. We traveled in America, the 48 contiguous states, but also throughout Canada. I think I missed 2 or 3 provinces. So pretty much from not British Columbia, but the next one, Manitoba to Newfoundland. Just seeing people all over. And one thing I learned about it was people are pretty much people everywhere I go. I can't say, oh, people in Newfoundland are like blank, or people in Iowa are like blank.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the cultural diversity, the independence and self-reliance, and I imagine that the teamwork and the communication, not only verbally communicating, but what are you saying non-verbally that you're catching on to, the nuances of communicating, all of those kinds of skills that translate or transition to any career, but aren't necessarily easy skills to have or create. It's interesting to hear you talk about that.
Well, I have to tell you that it wasn't like it somehow I just naturally became an expert at all these things. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And when I left the circus, I made lots and lots of mistakes. I referred to myself at one point as a master of damage control because I would make so many mistakes, but I also learned how to recover from them.
When I talk to you, and I think of not only your curiosity, but your willingness to take a risk, try something. Oops, it didn't go the way I wanted it to. What can I learn from it?
Also, for my journey, when I look back, I realized, all of these things led me. I learned from each one of them, but usually by making mistakes, not by walking into it, having it figured out. And I still don't have it figured out. In the leadership area, I was a leader of myself, and our whole family was a leader. And a lot of people modeled leadership in ways that were really fascinating to me. Most of them were pretty functional. Some were dysfunctional. But I learned a lot about people, just about what motivates people. But most of that actually came through being close to the animals. I mean, I liked animals, so I was around the horses. One thing, a quick one I learned was that, so our horses were percherons, which originated from an area of France and Belgium. And they were big draft horses. So they weighed 2,000 pounds and up. So like one of our horses was 2,200 pounds. And when that horse stepped on my foot, and that would happen sometimes because they would just move their foot and they didn't see your foot. Now, first of all, because they have big dinner plate size feet, it's not as bad as it sounds. It hurts, but it didn't crush my foot or anything. Maybe a couple bruises. But the thing is, how do you get them off your foot? Because they're just busy eating their hay or doing whatever. Percherons are pretty easygoing. And so I learned quickly, if I push on the horse, get off my foot, the horse just leans back into me. And there's even more weight on my foot. And so quickly I learned that I had to do something, I had to be counterintuitive around them, because the intuitive thing was to push them. And, as a skinny little, 120-pound kid, I couldn't push a 2,200-pound horse over. And so the idea was to use some kind of motivation that worked for them and to stay calm, even with pain. And so the trick was one was to just bend down and touch their foot and go, can I have your foot, please, for a second? And they would pick their foot up, and then I'd be relieved and I'd pet them, thank you. If that didn't work sometimes, then was to actually kind of lead them, lean over, if I was a front foot, luckily, lean over and see if I could get them to move forward. Or to, if I was accessing, if I had any kind of treat, was to offer them a treat, but to move it far enough away so they could go toward it. Anyway, just some little tricks on motivation that I learned around horses is to appeal to what they do naturally and not to react so much.
Challenging what you expect and looking beyond that. And I think that's probably another one of your strengths, is that you're able to do that.
Circus is hard work. It's not, a lot of people see it as romantic. And, you know, there was a reason that at 24, I decided to run away from the circus and join life, you know, versus, you know, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, run away and join the circus. And so I did the opposite. It's a lot of work. And the other thing is, it does, you know, I would turn a somersault in the back of a galloping horse. I started doing that when I was 14. You know, it looked easy. When I look, I have some video, old film, 8mm films that were converted of me turning a somersault, and I make it look so easy. And I realize, I'm not kidding you, but I did that somersault hundreds and hundreds of times and failed before I actually did it right. I had a safety on while I was practicing, because there's no reason getting hurt while you're practicing. And the idea is to get it down to where it's you get it down so well that you don't need a safety. And I still failed sometimes. I still would miss the trick sometimes. We had all kind of safety measures, spotters on the ground. I learned how to fall. Safety was a big thing of mine. So it's weird. When I worked in different fields, I was always looking for, wow, somebody can get hurt doing this. And so it was always, I guess that endeared me to some of the management, because they don't want people hurt either. But I stayed curious and tried to learn. The thing is, when my parents drove cross country, while they were driving, I was reading. I was a voracious reader. So whether it was, you know, Alfred Hitchcock novels, or I love science, and I just started reading about anything I could get my hands on.
When you left the circus, and I think your first position was in a bank, and then as you moved into other positions, you used that same approach. Tell me more about what you're doing, that curiosity to learn about training, to learn about some of the other things that you've done.
That's something that I took with me from the circus. So I got assigned to as a janitor, which I said no to, actually. And they said, well, Kim, we don't have anybody else, and we like you. And they said, and it's at nights and no one will see you, you know. And I went, all right, my pride, I'll swallow my pride. I'll go swab toilets. And I went there for a couple of months and did that. And so I started looking around, and while the people were there, because I was there from the afternoon to midnight, I would talk to the people while they were there and just ask them questions. What do you do? What is this about? What does that machine do over there? And so Caterpillar makes, you know, the world's largest heavy equipment manufacturer. And so I really got curious, and I guess I was just interested in stuff, you know, and it apparently impressed some people. It didn't seem, it's just nosy. And also, I was a hard worker. I'm used to hard work. And so I got 8 hours worth of work done in 6 or less hours. Then I had 2 hours to read and ask questions and walk around and look on people's desks and see what's going on. And when a job come up, they asked me to work there, and I decided that was it. I was going to leave the circus and work full time, but not as a janitor. I worked in parts. Fast forward 3 years later, and I was the assistant training director. And so that's pretty big jump up. I'm not patting myself on the back. I just impressed the training director. And he was questioned, why are you hiring Kim? He doesn't know about that much about Caterpillar and heavy equipment. And he said, I'm not hiring him for what he knows. I'm hiring him for his potential. And that man became a mentor to me. I'm going to say his name, Ray Lamar. And he is now 93 years old and living in Florida. And I just talked to him a few weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
And we're still good friends. Yeah.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. So that's one of the other things, if I had to recommend anything to anybody, is find a mentor. You know, ask for mentors. Would you show me that? Would you teach me that? You know, I took lots of workshops over my life in the last 20 years. And one of the trainings I took was something called Radical Honesty. And the leader of it, Brad Blanton's what he was teaching a form of mindfulness, and he was a gruff old guy from Texas, and he called it noticing shit. And I realized, yeah, I've noticed shit over my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was noticing stuff with people, and that sometimes other people didn't notice. And even mechanically, some things, when I read a page and a half of technical information about how something worked, I would look at it and have to read it 3-4 times and then go, oh, and that's how I got the job. They were interviewing me and they gave me a page and a half to read about how something worked. And I read it over a few times and I explained it in one sentence. So yeah, I just was able to translate, which is what I do as a mediator and a coach.
Yeah, which is where I want to take us. So the intersection of your background, your circus background, but then the other professions, the other careers that you've had, people might say, how did you go from that to being a mediator? How did that come about? But I also imagine that brings a unique, maybe even a fresh perspective to what you do because of where you've been and the experiences you've had. So tell me about how those experiences, your past experiences, and the way you approach life has benefited you as a mediator.
I think mediation first attracted me because I was so bad at conflict and sometimes just made it worse. And I was told by one person one time, if there isn't stress and conflict, Kim, you'll create it. And I was like, that's not how I want to be or be remembered. Because I was kind of an intense person and, always trying to learn and move things forward. So I thought, okay, I need to do this. And so while I was working, I went from Caterpillar in Florida to Caterpillar in Virginia to a sales job actually for a year, which was fascinating. And then I became a manager, a service manager for Caterpillar's biggest competitor. And then I got an opportunity to apply for the Department of Transportation. Now, what does any of this have to do with a circus kid or mediation or coaching? And a kid who was interested in science and psychology and all that. Actually, more than you realize, because I was able to apply some of those skills there. And when I was at the working for the department, when I applied for the Department of Transportation, I never forget, I showed up an hour early for the interview and I walked around and I talked to people. I just figured, well, all they can do is tell me you can't be here and tell me to leave. So I went through the back door kind of, and I just walked in and I started walking around and I said, oh, these are the people that will be reporting to me, because I was going in as a manager. So I started talking to them, hey, what's it like to work here? What are you working on today? Wow. I was just curious, how long have you been doing this? And then I'd go over to somebody else. And I ended up talking to one of the people the person I was going to replace. And I didn't even know it. I just said, what are you doing here? And he told me. I was like, later, I thought, oh, wow, that's the title I'm getting. And so when I sat down to the interview, I had all this inside information, but I also got a feel for the culture of the organization, which is so important. And I was able to adapt. And again, not faking it, not putting on a mask, but adapting myself. I have this world's biggest diamond here, by the way. And I use that sometimes to explain that, when I went there, the core of my being, who I am, it doesn't really change the essence of me. It's the point. But I have different facets, like everybody. And sometimes, when you're with your friends, you may have a slightly different facet. And when you're with your business colleagues, it's not you're being fake or anything. You're just presenting a different part of your unique essence, your unique self. And I did the same there. I didn't try to be anything I wasn't. I just was, oh, okay. Oh, this is something that's in my wheelhouse. I can do this. And I started talking more along those lines, and I got the job.
While you were doing this, you were also getting interested in mediation?
Yeah. I think I just, once again, it was fate, whatever, something, the universe, whatever you want to think. I just saw some flyer somewhere. And again, very interested in human potential. I was going to workshops. I was reading books on self-improvement, psychology, and mental health, and all this stuff. I was just fascinated by it. And a lot of it was to heal my own demons.
Mhm.
And another part of it was also because I wanted to contribute something to that area. And when I saw that there was a mediation training, and I believe it was either in a paper or a flyer, when I read what it entailed and what you could do with it, I went, yeah, that's something I want to learn.
Mhm.
And then when I went there, and again, when you come out of mediation training, first you have to spend hundreds of dollars in about 1 or 2 years to get certified. And then at the end of it, you become a volunteer. It was a labor of love. I liked it. And I says, wow, if only I could make money at this, it would be great. I'd like to do more of this type of thing, maybe not necessarily court-ordered mediations. And by the way, court-ordered means, something goes to court, and then they say, well, you have a choice. You can go in front of the judge, let the judge decide, or you can go in front of a mediator and you can work with them, and then you two or however many people get to decide. And so some people chose mediation. And I got to learn a lot about people there too. I don't know, I pull in a lot of skills, my curiosity, my ability to deal with diversity. I was conflict avoidant a lot growing up, believe it or not. And so I learned how other people are too, and how that doesn't often work. People. I think everybody is naturally conflict avoidant, and good, because if we liked conflict, it'd be a very different world.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So I think that's a good thing to be somewhat avoidant of it. But then when it happens, is to, how can I work with this? I can help people live better. And then when I picked the hardest one, I think, which is family mediation, which is when, mother and father are fighting over the kids. And it's highly emotional and very dramatic often. And that was the one I chose. And I was able to help contain that. I realized some of these people were in survival mode when they walked in. And, my job was to help them feel safer and calmer so that they could engage the more creative, rational parts of their brains and help them see why they're there, which is not about their own agendas. But in the case here, again, oversimplification, it's about the kids. Yeah, so I was able to, go back to we're doing this not so one of them can win or they both can win. We're doing this so the kids are better off and safer and have access to both parents, hopefully.
So your company name, I'm intrigued by it. I can't say warrior for some warrior mediator. Tell me about that. Tell me about that name. What's behind that name?
Well, one was kind of a pushback because I saw other mediators showing up and not putting them down. I just had lunch with a mediator today who teaches mediation too. But I saw some of them kind of coming in with being a super conflict avoidant, pushing for resolution, pushing for some kind of an agreement, which to me, the process was more important than whether they come to an agreement. Transformation was important. Having insights, having different perspectives, learning from it was more important than, all right, I'll quit calling you an asshole. I'm sorry, but okay, but you're still thinking it. Okay. So warrior mediator was, when I saw them coming in and kind of just going for that, and also kind of often soft-spoken and things. And so I found out that, when sometimes people get aggressive and they will try to verbally dominate or be verbally aggressive or emotionally aggressive toward another person in there. And I found out that I quickly, in the interest of safety, I quickly put a stop to that. And I wouldn't attack them, but what I would do is meet them in their boldness a little bit and then help dial it down with them and go, it's clear to me this is really meaningful to you. And or I'd say their name, Bob. Hey, Bob, hold on a second, Bob. And they'd look at me like, well, what? And I would I would use some kind of warrior energy, some boldness, slightly risky sometimes, not aggressive. And then I would just help, calm. I get this is really frustrating for you. You really want to be heard in this thing. And I hear you're saying, and this is what you're saying, right? And then they finally heard. They go, yeah, I just want the other person to know that. And I just look at the other person. Did you get what he's trying to say? Yeah, I get it. Okay. So they've heard you, and I'm trying to calm it down. So, but I'll use that kind of energy sometimes. Yeah. So I'm there for both clients. I don't take sides. I power balance. And that takes some warrior energy. And warrior simply means, amping the energy up a little bit and being proactive and creating a strong container for the process so that people feel safe and we can do it, whatever we need to do in their best interests. I will fiercely protect each person's right to be heard. No one will stop someone from being heard, not in my mediation. I make sure that I help them, I kind of coach them on the skills to be heard in the mediation by using reflective listening, different skills like that. Yeah, so I'm just using different kind of listening, mediation, conflict resolution. I take skills, again, from the circus when somebody's scared or upset. When I have a client all of a sudden yell, "This is bullshit," and they get up and walk out, I don't freak out. I just go, okay, why don't we take a break right now? And I make sure that person goes in a different direction than the other people. If, I don't want people upset around each other. And in that case, the person came back after about 5 minutes and sat down and we started working again. I remember, when a leopard you're trying to get a leopard to do something it doesn't want to do, and it gets upset with you, you can't force it. You have to help it feel safe and calm, and there has to be something in it for them to go in the direction you want them to go. That's true for people too, I think. Well, I talked about creativity and being curious, but also creativity. I think I just, like a lot of people, I bet, I'm older, I'm 68, and I work around a lot of people. I coach people in the tech field that are in their 20s and 30s, and I'm super impressed. I really like the quote next generations. And they're very creative and they're challenging a lot of things. I like that. I was like that too. So that's why I kind of resonate with them. One of the things I remind them about is to learn the soft skills. And I hate that phrase. They're not soft. They're powerful. One time when I was calling around the country looking for a job, and I was a trainer, and I was kind of at the top of my game for Caterpillar, I called a place on the West Coast, and the person said, "Well, I heard you're really good at what you do." And I went, "Well, thank you." And he said, "I also heard you're a bitch to work with." And that was his exact words. I've never been called the B word before, but it certainly got my attention. And I went, "Okay." And he said, "Yeah." He said, and he meant that sometimes I was hard to work with. And I never forgot that. I don't want to be that person that's hard to work with. And so I don't want to be an arrogant, good person who's good at what they do, because I figured out already then, no matter how good you are, if you can't work around people, no one's going to want you. But I was becoming some of that. And so that was part of my journey. That was a wake-up call. And I wish I could remember that person's name. I would thank them. But I learned how to handle conflicts, not perfectly, have difficult conversations, and also be kind yet firm. I think those are some of the soft skills right there. Yeah.
Well, and an openness to feedback and accepting critical feedback and saying, okay, instead of "how dare you?" and
no, not at all. I just went, okay, wow, yeah. And sometimes, I like people who are honest with me. And also, I started learning my values and passions way too late in life, and I started figuring out, why do I keep drifting to these things? It's because those are part of my values and my passions. And to make values-based decisions versus just logical ones. I don't know if that makes sense. So values are just what's important to you. And, and it could be, status, money, being in charge could all be important to you. Okay, they're part of your values. Then get a job in that area. So I mentioned finding a mentor too. The other thing is that I also learned to be bold as a warrior. Part of it was to go for positions that even though I had the voice in my head, and I believe everybody on the planet, almost all the healthy people, have a little voice in their head that says not good enough. And it could be anything, physical, emotional, whatever, money, you name it, and all the things we measure. And I had one in my head that was not good enough, smart enough, whatever, for this job. And I started noticing that, and I didn't go, "Yes, I am." I just went, okay, how can that not good enough inform me? And what can I do about it? And then I went for the job anyway.
Oh, I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
it's not as easy as it sounds. But I did. I just kept, it's kind of like keeping the not good enough voice in perspective, not eliminating it, because it can also help motivate a person. It's kind of a negative motivation to be a better person. The other one, I was relentless. I didn't give up. And that's because, turning all those hundreds of somersaults until I got it. I mean, oh gosh, I did so many. And I just wasn't going to give up. I was going to have that perfect somersault down. I never got it perfect, honestly. There was a term in I think it's neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and they say no failure, only feedback.
Mhm.
And everything I do, I just started realizing I was looking at its feedback. Okay, that didn't work. Let me try this. That didn't work. Let me try this. So at some point, when I say don't give up, I don't say never give up. Just don't give up right away would be a better term.
Mhm.
Don't be a fool either.
Mhm.
But I mean, don't keep going and going and going and going. And it's like, this is never going to go anywhere. But I was making incremental improvements and learning each step of the way. And that helped a lot.
This has been so interesting. I want to thank you for your time, both today and other times that we've chatted. I really want to thank you for investing in this. It doesn't surprise me that you did fully invest in this, because that's who you are. And
Thank you.
I just really appreciate it. And I appreciate.
Thank you, Laura, for the opportunity.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
means a lot. And I appreciate the work that you're doing and putting information out for people so that they don't have to make some of the, they can learn from it. So
Absolutely.
again, I have all the work I need. But if somebody's curious or wants to talk or something, I take some clients virtually for mediation and coaching. And you can reach me at, it's just warriormediator.com, WARRIOR and there's .com.
So yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much
This
again.
has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity.